Art. Please like and subscribe our channel. A figure of a young man walked on the bridge, wearing a long crimson cloak that seemed to have seen many battles due to the cuts and scorch marks on the bottom of the cloak. The cloak had no hood and ended just below the figure's nose, as the two belts that held it together around the figure's body were in the front where his mouth is located. The cloak waved in the sea breeze as the young man walked in the mist-ridden bridge. He wore a black bodysuit with fishnet for sleeves and a mask that covered the lower neck to just below the eyes. He wore snug, loose-fitting pants with a headband of a leaf with a slash through it around his waist. His eyes were completely different from each other. His left eye had a crimson blood-red trim around the eye, iris and pupil, while in between it was soft glow of dead cerulean blue. His right eye had a glow of dead violet iris with a blackish-red pupil. His hair was long and flowing in the minor wind present. The weird thing about his hair was that the left side of his head had crimson tips as the blonde hair with sliver highlights were the most present. The right side of his head had black as night tip's eye, and the sea of blonde with sliver highlights. In the young man's left hand was a long katana with jade green leather around the hilt, and what seemed to be a locket around the hilt. The sheath was completely black as the guard was a long sliver dragon wrapping around itself. The young man donned black sandals as they hit the bridge. If one looked closely, they would see a tattoo on his right hand, with the numbers 666 in a triangle formation. He continued to walk through the mist and shortly stopped as he came to a dome of ice mirrors and the sounds of a battle nearby. A large spike of the young man's killing intent, and all attention was on him. "Please move yourself from my path before I move you yourself," spoke the young man, but his voice is ice cold and sounded like that of a teenager. A Kiri hunter nin appeared from out of a mirror and looked at the young man before the shinobi spoke. "Excuse me, Samurai-san, but I do not wish to hurt you, so please go around and evade the battle happening, please," the hunter nin from Kiri said in a kind voice. The young man just looked at the hunter nin before walking past him and into the ice mirror dome. There he seen two Konoha genin, and noticed that one was Uchiha Sasuke, the so-called last Uchiha. When there was his brother Itachi, then there was his lover who was killed by Itachi in Madara. He knew the true reason behind the massacre. He knew his love was taken from him when she had nothing to do with the coup that her clan had planned. He knew that the people who gave the order to Itachi, and he knew he was just being used by the village. He could feel the bloodlust come up to the surface, but as soon as it came up it was pushed down. "I do not wish to interfere with your fight, but I have a very important place to get to and a very important person to see. So, move this other mirror before I destroy it and move on. If you do not cooperate and attack me, I will defend myself and aim to kill," he said in the same icy cold tone, only this time with a bigger spike of killing intent. The hunter nin nodded and moved the mirror to the side enough for the young man to get through, before moving it to its original spot. Such power, and he is about as old as I, the Kiri hunter nin thought before turning back to the two others inside the dome, the two Konoha shinobi. A man with a mask, wearing a full body suit, and a Kevlar flat jacket with sliver gravity deifying hair went wide-eyed at the familiar spike of killing intent. "It can't be. Why is he here of all places?" The man questioned himself as he blocked a large zanbato from a man just as large as he with a mask covering the lower part of his face. Both men turned to the presence that came into view, one with both different eyes wide open and the other with both eyes closed. The young man stopped as the two older men stood there in a deadlock staring at him. His multicolored eyes looked bored and annoyed before he spoke. "Move yourselves from my path, before I become impatient with the lot of you and pave this path with blood once more." He spoke in cold tone once again, only this time he sent out a wave of killing intent that had the two and your men sweating and breathing hard from it. The man with the large zanbato jumped back and out of the way of the young man. "That headband is from Konoha, but it's as a missing nin. And this kid doesn't look like Uchiha Itachi. So just who the hell are you then?" the eyebrow-less man thought as the young man walked by him. The sliver hair stood frozen and paled as he saw the young man walk right past him, only to stop and turn to him. "Scarecrow, do not think I did not forget what you tried to do before I left Konoha that night. I knew it was you behind that Inu mask. I've seen you have smartened up since the last time. It would have been unpleasant to have to remove annoyances from my path again. The young man said and looked over his shoulder at the slivered hair shinobi. His eyes, glowing like a phantom as his hair wavered in the wind. He then turned and continued to walk through the mist-ridden bridge, soon disappearing. The sliver-haired shinobi sighed as he sensed the young man disappear. But that look in the young man's eyes had said everything that would happen to him if he or his enemy Zabuza had not moved. SS rank missing nin Uzumaki Naruto. The Bakemono no Kage 1. He said in a faint whisper, the only one close enough to hear it was his enemy Momochi Zabuza. The Akuma no Kiri, and he did hear it. Zabuza went wide-eyed at the information. He had the latest bingo book and it had no picture of the only SS ranking nin in the book. Just an alias and weapons description. He now knew why Konoha marked him a rank S missing nin, but why to go as far as rank SS? Flee on sight and do not engage a loner at all. As far as he remembered, that same rank and order has not been in the bingo book since Namikaze Minato, and the order was for Iwa Shinobi and Kunoichi. To think someone this young could have a whole nation feared was something to be awed at and aware of. Plus, this kid had Sharingan. Kakashi, afraid for his life, was saying something. He just shook off the feeling coming from the missing nin and recovered the same time Kakashi did and continued their fight. Naruto continued to walk in the mist as it started to lessen. He knew he was near the end of the artificial mist created by the ranked missing nin Momochi Zabuza. As he walked out of the mist, he spotted a girl a year younger than he with bubblegum pink hair. She held a kunai in her hand, in a weak defensive position as he walked closer and closer to her and the old man who looked like a drunk. He stopped as she and the old man were in his path. Both of you move, I have somewhere to go. If you do not move from my path, I will promise you that you will not see the next minute or breathe after this moment. He said in an icy cold tone and used his thumb to push up the guard in the hilt of his okatana to show the two his sliver blade. The two slowly backed out his way as he continued to walk on the path he was walking on. The last Team 7er Momochi Zabuza and his student scene of Uzumaki Naruto was on the bridge. Naruto was well into the forest of the Nami no Kuni, and he stopped walking as he turned to his left. You can come out, Jiraiya-san. I was expecting you sooner or later. And so did Jiraiya. The Gama Sennin in his glory came out of the tree he was standing on. His white hair flowing in the air as red makeup lines make it look like crimson tears run down his face. His custom-made headband had the kanji for oil on it as he looked at Naruto. So, what's the celebration about? He asked with a small smile. I'm going to find her, and if she doesn't remember, I will just make Surway fall in love again. Naruto said as he looked up through the trees to the sky with a faraway look in his eyes that seemed to be alien to his face. How exactly are you going to do that? There's not like there's anyone who can grant wishes. Jiraiya laughed a little before he found Naruto's serious masked face looking at him. Whoa, there is. Maybe I can get a wish, he said as he rubbed his chin. You can't. Only those who have the need for the wish can only enter where I'm going. For someone whose soul is damned to be devoured by evils that should not exist could experience love, happiness, and light where all he does is live in the darkness and strive to be in the light. As long as I feel her touch, see her smile, or hear her voice of her soul, I will be happy just to be near her and die. But if I can feel her love once again, I'd be willing to throw everything I know and have to have my light back. Naruto said as his ice-cold glaze looked up at the sky as crimson blood tears fell from his eyes for the first time in 6 years. Jiraiya looked at his godson he helped take care of when he was first announced a rank-ass missing nin. Then after the first year of showing him how to balance himself, his power and skill went up tenfold. Jiraiya knew that Naruto was the child of prophecy, as his godson could control all he elements perfectly. Even Akatsuki had given up trying to even catch him as their leader had found out his true power and his true weakness. Jiraiya knew that what would happen if and when Naruto died. The Satan cells that his bastard of an old teammate injected into Naruto when he took him a short time after the sealing. The cells actually contained that monster's consciousness, and not only had Naruto had Kyuubi sealed inside of him trying to take control, he had to deal with a demon as old and strong as Kyuubi as well. But as far as Jiraiya knew, Lucifer or the Satan cells just wanted to influence Naruto's actions. But that time 6 years ago, he felt the aura that Lucifer gave off and how evil it wanted Naruto to be. But he didn't want Naruto so suffer the fate that the two souls sealed inside of him set up. They purposely changed the seal from the inside and outside, so that when Naruto dies, they would devour his soul and set free some odd years after that if he did not hand over total control of his body to either one. But what pained Jiraiya the most was seeing Naruto shed those blood tears for his love in his past, that is now lost happiness. Those tears, the only symbol he had not lost of what he was not, a demon. I wonder what the price of my wish will be. No matter I will pay it to be with her. Jiraiya, I guess this will be the last time we will see and talk to each other. You can tell Sarutobi that time may heal wounds, but a fatal wound he did to me will never heal. I may be sympathetic of the choice he had to make, but I can never forgive him for the darkness he dropped me into and the light he took away. He may be like a grandfather to me, but that night 6 years ago severed all ties I had to Konoha and Sarutobi. And here there is 2 things I need you to do for me. Naruto said as he handed Jiraiya a piece of paper and a stone. The paper is a note to the person who gave me this Okatana, and if she doesn't meet you, just look for a mountain where the dragons meet, and I think you know what the stone is for back in Konoha. You know I would do that myself, but you know how it is. He said as he turned to leave, but stopped and looked at the only real father figure he had throughout his life. He then reached up to his mask and pulled it down to show Jiraiya his face, that had been covered since he was returned to Konoha from Orochimaru and even before that they found him with it on. You're the only person alive now that have seen my face, the face of your son Jiraiya. I may be Minato's legacy, but I see you as my true father and him as a birth father and a friend. Naruto said and put his mask in the right place, and started to walk off. Jiraiya got a good look at his son's face. The left side underneath his eye had 3 whisker-like birthmarks on his cheek, while underneath his right eye on his cheek was a dancing flame tattoo-like birthmark that continued to dance on his face. Jiraiya smiled and called out to him before Naruto fully disappeared from his sight. You would have been a lady killer with those looks, just like me, your old man. As Naruto disappeared from his sight, a lone tear fell from the Gamma Senin's cheek. Yeah, you are just like me, just more hurt than I am. He thought just before he too disappeared via reverse summoning. He didn't notice the other piece of paper that Naruto dropped. Another figure appeared dropping down from a tree, his black cloak with red clouds blowing slightly in the wind. He reached down and picked up the paper that Naruto dropped. He read the one word that was on the folded up part. Itachi. Uchiha Madara was not happy at the situation he was in. If it had not been for that pain in the side snake Orochimaru, the success rate of his plans would have gone up to close to 100% of success. But somehow that snake had got his hands on the sample of the Lucifer cells Madara himself sealed away. Then he had stupidly injected them in the Kyuubi host thinking he could press the Kyuubi and take control of the body while the Kyuubi was sealed further. At the time only Madara knew what the Lucifer cells could do and why he couldn't control it like he could somewhat like the Kyuubi. Lucifer had thoughts of humans and wanted power for itself. Kyuubi was a beast and no thoughts like humans until damn that hubby made things impossible now. He cursed loudly as his Sharingan eyes spun around in annoyance. He then turned to the new presence he sensed teleport inside the room. He noticed the pair of Sharingan eyes that the new presence had and nodded. Yes, Itachi, what is it? He asked, only to be handed a note. If you were reading this, then I must assume you were either Itachi or Madara. If so, then I'll inform you that since your plans were derailed when Orochimaru fused me with the Satan cells. Doing this, however, caused our world to become unbalanced. Can't have a human with the power to take on the goddess Amaterasu or the god Tsukuyomi now, can we? Oh, I know all about the gods your cursed eyes steal from. Just so you know, sooner or later they will find out and they will come to destroy you. And since I will be gone, there's no way for you to fuse yourself with that Tengu. So, balance will once again become somewhat restored in this world. As for me, well, you should know what I'm going to by now if you're reading this line. Does it just infuriate you that one mistake caused you and your plans to fall into pieces and cause your death? Well, it makes me glad that I'm not the only one who will be suffering a long and agonizing death. umbled up the paper before setting it on fire. Damn you Namikaze. Damn your son too, he said before sitting down in the chair to his left. He had to think of something and something fast. Sarutobi. Sasuke frowned at the news he had just received from his student. He said that did he? He asked and got a nod in return from Jiraiya. I wouldn't put it past him though, I did screw up and it had own back to not only bite me in my ass but someone I considered a grandson also. He said with a sad look on his face as he looked at the monument of the Hokages. You think he'll be alright? Yay Sarutobi-sensei, I did help him through the time where he wouldn't say or do anything. I never thought I would see someone so broken like that. It was like he was only seeing the scene over and over. The ghostly look in his eyes. It was like he died there too. Then one day after 2 years, he just got up and said he needed to search for something on his own for a while. He would keep in touch and after that, he disappeared off the face of the earth. I would get a messenger hawk of a cage bushin, and that was it. Just letters of how he was doing and how he would help people instead of killing people for a village that worked for money. In his letters he said something about living with a monk and 2 priestess, who he said that one was sadistic and the other was ditzy. Then a few days ago I got the message to meet him in Nami. And after talking and saying our goodbyes he showed me why he was such a lady killer with that smile. Jiraiya smiled as he thought about another series. He showed you his face? Sarutobi asked surprised. Yeah, I bet he thought it was a sort, remember me by this, sort of thing. But I know if he didn't wear that mask all the time, women would go crazy over his exotic look. Now sensei, I have one last thing to do for him. And with that Jiraiya disappeared. Naruto stopped in front of a door to a shop in the clearing of the forest. Guess this is the place that my body leads me, he thought before he opened the door to see a beautiful young woman with long flowing black as night hair. She was wearing an elegant kimono with a blue and gold trimmed butterfly on the front of it. I've seen you have come for a wish to be granted. Such despair and hurt in one's soul surrounded in darkness, tell me where is your light? The beautiful woman asked. My light was put out before it shined like she was supposed to, so I've come here to see you Yuko-sama for a wish. Naruto said with a bow. Then follow me young one and we shall discuss the payment. The beautiful woman known as Yuko said as she led him further into the store. Naruto looked around and found that the store had a conformable taste of style as he was led into a room. So, this is the Dimension Witch's shop. I thought it wouldn't be so roomy and conformable. He muttered to himself and Yuko caught it. Appearances can be deceiving, as you know since you're a shinobi. Yuko said with a smile. So tell me what is the wish you want? She asked as she stepped into a room and sat down in a chair. I wish to meet the reincarnation of my love, Uchiha Makoto. Jiraiya stood in front of a grave. The grave was labeled with a simple gravestone that seemed incomplete. The writing on the gravestone though seemed to be clear as day as the shade from a nearby sakura tree gave it. The writing O.N. the gravestone said, Here lies Uchiha Makoto, my light and above all my love. Jiraiya bent down and took out the stone Naruto had given him. It was a beautiful ruby as it reflected and absorbed all light that hit it. He then put the ruby into the slot at the bottom of the gravestone. He quickly backed his hand away as a flame appeared just in front of the ruby and new writing appeared above the ruby. It said, May her light burn as hot as fire, and make the darkness of her loved ones disappear. Jiraiya just shook his head as he stood up and turned away. Kid, you still have some light in you if you go out of your way to make her conformable in death. I see, so you rather feel love than continue have a life after you die. Yuko asked, only to get a nod from the masked young man in front of her. Then I will require a payment. That payment will be most of your power. Do you accept? She asked and yet again get a nod from the young man. Then this will hurt a lot. As soon as those words left her lips, Naruto felt pain unlike any he had felt before. It felt like the insides were being ripped out of him. He was bent over in pain as he held back his cries of pain. He was drifting towards unconsciousness but he looked up at Yuko and she had a sad smile on her face, before reaching up to his cheek and pushing him backwards. Sleep. When you awake you will be on your quest with your sword Ginryu. Just give into the unconsciousness and your wish will be granted. Was all he heard before he let his vision go black. As the ritual for his power finished, it formed into a necklace with a pendant. The pendant on the necklace had a picture of a fox with 6 tails on it. With the fox was a hawk with only one wing attacking a small dragon. Yuko took hold of the necklace and held in her hand as she sent Naruto through a portal. Find your light, young dragon, and find your love. She then walked out the room and was met by 2 people. One was a boy with glasses around the age of 16 or 17, while the other was a woman with long red hair that curled around like springs at the end. So, you sent him to where he wanted to go, the red-haired woman said. And to think when my rain hit him, I could get a good picture of him, she said with a faraway look in her eyes. Ah, so the rain spite has a crush for a customer of mine? Yuko asked in a teasing way before turning to the boy. Watanuki, take this to the basement and put it on a hanger. Yes, Yuko-san, the boy known as Watanuki said as he took the necklace and soon disappeared around the corner. So where did you send him, Yuko? The rain spite asked. Just to where he wished to go, that is all, she said, and she turned to the corner where Watanuki disappeared to and yelled. Watanuki, bring some sake back with you. She then walked into a different room followed by the rain spite, but not before thinking. Will you be able to truly balance yourself, the world, and your light like you balanced your dimension? It had been about half a week since the failure of General Zhao on the siege of the North Pole, and the defection of the banished Prince Zuko and General Iroh. Now it was her job to set out and gather the 2 and bring them back to her father, Fire Lord Ozai. She was the crown princess of the Fire Nation, Princess Azula, and she was not happy at being the errand boy of her father forgetting her brother and uncle. The thing was, she had to be packed and ready to hunt down the 2 in 2 days. But what she was not happy about was the strange dream she had last night. The same time the intruder appeared out of nowhere in front of the palace unconscious. Now, she had been called to go before her father once again after she had visited the prisoner. And she had done that earlier that morning, and the dream from the night before had come back to hit her in her face. Flashback. Azula walked down the hall leading to the holding cells in the nearby prison, and that's when she heard the sounds that made her become cautious about this nighttime intruder. As she turned the corner, she was met with a sight that would have anyone a bit confused. I said, give me my blade or I will snap his man's neck before he can even think about how he lived his life. And if you don't give me my blade soon, I cannot promise that you or anyone else will be able to breathe. Now hand it over. He art a boy about the same age as her yell and felt the burst from his aura that slapped her in the face. She couldn't get a good look at the boy, but she did get a good look at his hair color and the traveling cloak he wore. His hair was the strangest color. It was yellow with sliver streaks throughout it, with black tips on one half of his head and crimson red tips for the other half. And that cloak was crimson, but at the bottom of it there were cuts and burns that looked like it had gone through war and came back. The guard who had the boy's blade handed it over and backed away as quickly as possible. Once the boy had the blade, he let go of the guard he had in his hold and walked to the back of the cell and sat down. Azula could tell he was much calmer and relaxed once he grabbed his blade. As she approached the cell, the guards caught sight of her and bowed. Her eyes never left the boy as his head was low and hair covered his eyes. He sat with his legs crossed and his blade's hilt aiming on his right shoulder and the sheathed blade in between his legs. Even as she approached his cell, the boy never looked up at her. That made her angry, because no one disrespected her. You, who are you and why did you come to the palace? Was it to assassinate me or my father? She asked in a demanding tone. She got no reaction from the boy whatsoever, and showed she was a bit irritated. Fine, since you won't talk without any violence, how about I show you some? At that she sent some fire at the boy. She smirked as the fire was about to engulf the boy, but it soon faded as he did. She had seen no one do except firebenders who had experience in weapons. At the last possible moment the boy's face shot up, as did his body, and cut her stream of fire in half with a quick draw of his blade. The thing that surprised her the most was that he had his eyes closed throughout the whole ordeal. What do you want? The boy said in an icy cold tone as he started to open his eyes. As he opened his eyes and they met with hers, it seemed that everything just stayed frozen in time as she remembered her dream from last night full force. Someone will come to see you. She heard a voice say. Who are you, and why would someone would come to see me? She yelled as the darkness around her became to close in. Someone will come to save you. She heard the voice once more say, I do not need to be saved. I am my own savior. I form my own destiny. She yelled and the darkness close around her faster. Someone will come to make you remember. The voice speak once more. I don't need to remember anything. I am all I need. I was born to be of greatness. She yelled before the darkness grabbed hold of her feet and started to creep up her body. Someone will come to have you unlock your light and power. The voice said as the darkness was about to take her head in it hold. Then it all faded away. Two women who looked exactly like her if she was 5 or 6 more years older appeared. Instead of her amber eyes, one had crimson eyes while the other had violet eyes. Someone will come to love you and make you balanced, the women said before disappearing in black fire. As everything came back to speed, she snapped out of her trance and got a good look at the boy's eyes. They were different colors. His left eye was trimmed in crimson around the outer iris and around the pupil. The rest of the iris was the most wonderful shade of blue she had ever seen. His right eye, however, was violet with the most unusual shade of blackish red for a pupil she had ever seen. She heard him say one word that was a name, Makoto. After that he snapped back to his icy cold manner and sat back down to his previous position. Luckily for her, the guards were behind her and never saw her surprised expression, nor did they hear what the exotic boy said. She turned and walked past them and spoke. My father wants to see the prisoner, so escort him to the war room inside the palace and we will deal with him from there. She brushed the strands of hair that fell apart from her dark brown bangs that framed the front of her face. Before she left the hall though, she looked back at the cell and met the eyes of the exotic boy once more. Just who are you and why did that dream pop up when our eyes met? She thought before she turned and left the prison hall. End flashback. Now as she walked inside the war room of the palace, she saw her father, the prisoner from earlier, and one of the most skilled swordsmen in the Fire Nation army. She walked up to the right of her father and bowed respectfully to him and sat down. She and her father turned to the prisoner as he spoke up. As I asked her before, what do you want? His icy tone was even colder than she remembered from the time they met in the prison. Boy, you will show respect to Fire Lord Ozai, the swordsman said as he glared at the boy. Respect is earned through decisions and action, and he has yet to earn either in my eye. They boys said, then how about you earn my respect first? Ozai spoke, surprising Azula and the swordsman. Since you carry that strange blade, I assume you know how to use it well. And since we do not any other of your abilities, you will have a spar with the crown princess Azula, Ozai said, making the two look at him. You just want to know my weaknesses from these fights in case I decide to go against you. The swordsman and Azula was appalled that this boy would even think that their Fire Lord would even think of that. While Ozai just smiled. So, you have seen many battles and lived through them. So how about it? Ozai said as he looked the exotic masked boy in the eyes. Fine, but on 3 conditions, the masked boy said, getting an eyebrow raised from everyone inside the room. Okay, what are these conditions? Ozai asked as he stared the boy in the eye. 1. If I win the duel, I answer to no one but you or her, he said as he pointed to Azula. 2. If I win the spar against her, I become her personal bodyguard. Since if she can't defeat someone like me, she'll need me to protect her. At hearing this, Azula was visibly angry at the estimate of her skill and was about to speak out at the boy, but was not able to as he spoke again. And 3. If I win both the duel and spar, I and anyone I know who disappears with me are erased from history, all of it, like we never existed. At this the swordsman and Azula were confused. Ozai nodded in agreement. Deal. We will now begin and you get no rest between the spar and duel. The boy then nodded, and what the 3 could tell, the boy smiled sadistically. The boy and swordsman stood in front of each other, just 5 feet between them. They then bowed and the swordsman unsheathed his broadsword. The boy just put his right on the hilt and tilted the sword slightly downward. The swordsman rushed the boy thinking to end it quick, but was sadly mistaken as the boy evaded every attack he did and left him holding his gut. A deep but thin cut appeared when the boy attacked. How? I seen your attack and dodged it. He managed to speak out, but was still in lots of pain. Wind, it cuts as does fire burns and lightning stuns, the boy said before sheathing his blade and looked slightly winded. She took more than expected for payment. I shouldn't be this winded so quickly. He mumbled as he got into a stance across from Azula. So he's tired, but that speed he showed was no joke. I cannot underestimate him like that fool did. She thought before she spoke. So, what is your name, prisoner? She looked into his eyes and only say coldness. It's polite to introduce oneself before asking for a name of another. The boy said in a monotone voice, getting a smile that promised pain from Azula. Azula, crown princess of the Fire Nation. But you already knew that last part. Her smile never leaving her face. Uzumaki Naruto. Bakemono no Kage or Akuma no Konoha. Naruto said as he eyes steeled and ready to defend himself. Azula sent a wide stream at Naruto, who jumped over it and sent gust of wind at her. She cancelled out his gust with a wall of fire that was gone as soon as it hit the wind. She then kicked at him, sending a whip of fire from her heel. Naruto then countered with a wave of fire of his own to cancel out. As Ozai saw this, he was surprised. Not only did this Naruto boy use airbending, but he used firebending as well. Just what other things can you do, boy? And why hide your face with that mask? Ozai pondered as he continued to watch the fight. Azula and Naruto trading blow for blow with their fire. Naruto was starting to tire fast. How is she able to keep this up? How much chakra does this girl have? Not even Makoto had this much. Wait, she's not using chakra. I would be feeling spikes from her attacks, so that means she and every other person who can control the elements here uses some other energy. But what is it? And I have to find out quicker, I'm going to get burned. I will not even try to use their chakra no matter what. Naruto thought quickly as he evaded and stuck back from Azula's attacks. Tired are we? Just give it up before you get burned, Azula said as she pressed on. Naruto was watching her movements carefully and noticed she moved with a grace that was aggressive, yet controlled. He also noticed she took deep breaths since the beginning of the TCH and exhaled as she threw fire at him. Then it all clicked for him. She wasn't using chakra like he was. She was using a balance of natural energy from the elements with spirit energy. He smirked. I knew hardly as he found out the way she wasn't tiring as fast as he was. He inwardly cursed Yuko for taking so much of his power, but thanked her at the same time. He loved being pushed to his limits and had to find them all over and exceed them and refine his abilities once again. But he had to use nature to help him, something he had only done a handful of times before. He smirked as he remembered Ka-san, and his aunt, Mo-chan. He was really happy he left them both something to remember him by. He then jumped back 10 feet from Azula and stood straight. As Azula saw this, she rose her brow and thought he was going to give up, but was mistaken when Naruto closed his eyes and started to take deep breaths. She then felt a force build up around her like when she uses her lightning. So, she prepared her own lightning strike by clearing her mind and emotions. She then charged up her lightning and was about to shoot when Naruto opened his eyes and felt the energy from him. Naruto felt the energy around him, from the air, from the trees, and most importantly the sun. He then concentrated to refill his reserves and for a blow that would subdue his opponent. He concentrated and felt lightning form in his hands and willed it to form into balls. He opened his eyes and felt the energy surge through and he charged Azula as his energy flared. Rasengan, too, he yelled as he charged. Azula soon shook out of her shock and shot her lightning at him. What surprised her was when he shoved the ball of lightning in his left hand into her bolt and watched as the two cancelled each other out. The aftershock left his arm riddled with lightning and watch as he continued to charge. Even his whole left arm was covered in lightning like it was wrapped in wire. Before she could snap out of her state of shock, he was upon her holding the ball of lightning to her chest. So fast and such mastery over lightning. How was he able to control it like that? And such a tolerance for pain, to take the aftershock of that blast would make anyone paralyzed and screaming in pain. Yet, he just shook it off like a punch. She thought before he spoke. Do you concede? If not, this will hurt a lot. It's better to walk away while still being able to walk than be in a bed with third-degree burns and paralysis, Naruto said as he looked into her amber eyes. I could never do that to you. You look so much like her. I didn't think you would look exactly like her. I guess irony has come to show his head again. He inwardly sighed as he got a nod from her and cancelled the lightning ball. He stood up straight and faced Ozai. But not before bowing to Azula. I believe we have a deal to uphold, Fire Lord. Naruto asked, and Ozai nodded with a grin on his face. Such power and mastery over two elements for someone so young. I'd have to say you were a genius like Azula here. As for our deal, it will be upheld. Uzumaki Naruto was it? Ozai asked as his own amber eyes looked into Naruto's multicolored ones, as Naruto nodded. How do you know both airbending and firebending? Ozai asked. Naruto's gaze never left Ozai's eyes. I was trained from a very early age to use wind, fire, and lightning. So I could be a perfect assassin for the village I served for. Then after they betrayed me, I left and never returned. To this day, I am marked for death or flee on sight in their books. He said unblinkingly. Ozai just nodded as he could tell that the boy was telling the truth. Azula, Naruto here will accompany you on your mission to gather your brother and uncle for their treason. If you encounter the Avatar, you have full authority to eliminate him. Also, you can help with any attempts to invade Ba Sing Se with the resources available to you, since I trust your strategic mind. Naruto, since you re-injured, I will hold off the department for another week. At this Ozai he expected both of them to bow and leave, but only Azula bowed and Naruto looked like he was ready to speak. A delay won't be necessary. I am abnormally fast healer and shall be ready to leave tomorrow. No need to prolong something that is of importance, he said with a bow. Ozai just grinned, as he saw the boy was serious. You are a mysterious one, Uzumaki Naruto. I wonder if your mind is as sharp or sharper than your skills. Ozai pondered before speaking. Good, then you two shall leave at the scheduled time. You two are dismissed. They both bowed and respectfully said, Yes, Fire Lord. Before leaving, the two walked in silence as they left the war room. That was when Azula spoke up. How did you do that with the lightning? You were about to faint from exhaustion, yet you pull off a feat not many could. She asked him as she stopped in front of him. It was something I learned to do. Draw upon the elements and use them to the most effective way. As for the ball shapes, they are the most effective shape. They compact and expel the energy upon impact in the most simple shape that comes to mind. Now, May, you lead me to where I will be staying until we set off on our mission. He asked her, only to get a look of hatred instead. You may have won the match, but it gives you no right to talk to me in such disrespect. I will defeat you in a rematch, and I suggest you use that weird blade of yours. Because if you don't, you'll walk away with more than a burnt-up arm. She then turned and tried to leave, only to be grabbed and held to the wall. I didn't mean to disrespect you, but when you threaten me you knock on death's door. Be grateful that I have my reasons for not teaching a harder lesson than I did in that match. He said as his cold multicolored eyes bore into her amber ones. What's scared of my father? Afraid that'll he put you to death for hurting his daughter? She asked mockingly. Boruto's eyes grew colder and it scared her. She was petrified with fear from the look of those eyes. They were worse than her father's. I fear no man. I don't fear death either. The only thing I fear is my own demons. And pray or wish you never find out what they are, or else you will fear them also. This is not a threat. This is a warning. Do not think I am scared of men. I live my own life with my own fears, as do you. Now, as why do I not hurt you? It's because I am supposed to protect you. And I will, even if it brings me to death. With that, Naruto let her go. Azula caught her breath as he felt the aura that leaked out of Naruto. It was suffocating yet addictive at the same time. She looked at the masked multicolored-haired boy and nodded. Again he shows such power, but holds back as if something will change him. Still, with someone like him to watch him back, it will make things easier. She thought before straightened up and walked in front of Naruto. You will stay in my brother's room since has been empty for some years now. I shall get you before we leave tomorrow, and make sure you're ready because I wait for no one. She said, then lead him to his room. However, before he went into his room he stopped and stared at the door. It's true, I won't let you die as long as you're in my sight. Nor will I betray you. I can't let something that happened to her happen to you. He said before he opened his door and disappeared. Azula just stood there for a minute confused at what he meant. Won't let something that happened to her happen to me. Just who are you talking about, and what happened? she thought before turning and leaving to her room. Naruto sat on the bed inside the room as he laid his Okatana Ginryu next to him with his only functioning hand at the moment. His left hand was blackened and was unresponsive to any action he had willfully tried to move it. The paralysis will last a bit longer than expected, but it should be healed tomorrow, still sore and stiff. The discoloration will return to normal, but still have a slight pink hue due to the new skin cells. All in all, a bit more damage than expected from cancelling out the bolt instead of absorbing and redistributing the energy. He thought as he examined the arm. He was about to lay down when his eye caught a picture. It was a picture of 4 people in a group picture. There was a younger Ozai and Azula in the picture with a young boy and beautiful young woman that seemed to be Ozai's wife. As he examined the picture further, he saw that the boy was older than Azula by about 2 years. He suspected his was her brother that was a traitor. Before long, his eyes lingered on the locket on Ginryu. He took it in his right hand as the slight red glow from the 666 tattoo lit up the small area the locket was located. He used his thumb to press a button on the side of the locket and it opened. There were 2 pictures inside of it. The picture on the left side of the locket was that of a young Naruto. His mask present, but something else was there also. There was a ruby over his head as he had an eye smile and smile present. This itself looked like an alien to his cold manner but seemed to be real nonetheless. On the right side of the locket had a young girl about the age of 7. She had long dark brown hair that was held in a high ponytail as it flowed down from the back and the sides with 2 bangs that framed the front of her face. Her fully developed crimson Sharingan eyes seemed to spin even in the picture, as her smile seemed to make the picture brighter. Above her head were a ruby, an amethyst stone, and a sapphire jewel. He gazed at the locket for about a minute more before closing it and draping Ginryu on his lap as he drifted to the land of dreams, or in his case nightmares. Naruto stood in front of a body of a young girl, blood pooled around her and burns on her front. The look on her face was that of a crying woman, who was crying to a lover. The expression changed to that of contempt, like she wanted to die and see her lover for the last time before she did. Naruto looked at the body, not seeing one girl, but 2 identical but dressed differently and had different hairstyles. That was when he noticed their eyes. One girl had crimson eyes and was older than he remembered her, while the other seemed to be a year older and had amber eyes. Then he heard the voices. "I guess I can't keep that promise to you, Naruto. I hope you don't hold it against me," the crimson-eyed woman said as she laid in front of him. "I guess we can't disappear and live that life you offered me. Guess you can't save me this time like those last times. I wasn't ready for death, but if I go seeing you then this monster can rest peacefully," the amber-eyed girl said as she laid there. Naruto knew what he was seeing, the past in one eye and what could be the future in the other. He shook his head as he tried to will away the image in front of him. Unfortunately, it did not do so as a 3-tailed fox strolled onto the scene. "You and I both know that the past repeats itself, but this time, you will hand over control to me. As we both know, once she dies all hope is lost. The shadows of death are already upon her. It will be interesting how she dies. And we'll be there to see it," the fox said as it had an evil grin on the muzzle. Then a one-winged owl landed on the scene before turning into an identical Naruto with 1 black wing and a flame tattoo moving as if a real flame on his face. There was a tattoo of 666 on his forehead in a triangle formation. "Just give it up and cause chaos and destruction, or just conquer all with our power and rule it all. We all know we have the power to so. Just give into the darkness or be consumed by it. There is no other way," the clone of Naruto with the black wing said as he too had an evil smirk on his mouth. Naruto just fell to his knees as more images appeared. They were ranging from scenes of betrayal to death of innocence from his hands. "No, I won't be controlled like a puppet," he yelled as all the images shattered like a mirror. Now, only the fox, clone, and Naruto were there, surrounded by darkness that never ended nor had any light. He rose up to his feet and looked at the 2 monsters in front of him. "It's true that once she dies it's over, but as long as I have control and breath in my body, I will make sure I die before she dies. And I'll make sure it's from old age," he yelled at the 2. "Fine, just be on guard now, because the shadows that once protected you will now try to consume you," the fox said. It walked backwards with a snicker as the darkness engulfed it. Either way, I still get to cause chaos and destruction. It's just a waiting game now. The one-winged Naruto said as it too was engulfed by the darkness with an evil smirk ever present on his face. Naruto woke with a start as the sun shone through the window. He looked at his left arm and saw it was pink with new skin on it. He could move it normally, but wouldn't be to its fullest until mid-afternoon or after sunset. He sighed as he rose from the bed in a cold sweat. He then walked over to bathroom located on the other side of the room. He then stripped and went into the shower, his okatana leaning a foot away from the shower. Azula was walking down the hall on her way to Naruto's room to leave since she wanted to get the mission started. She arrived and knocked on the door a couple times. After about 3 minutes and getting no answer, she tried to open the door which she found unlocked and walked in. She found the room empty, but the bathroom door was slightly open. She heard the shower being turned off and shortly after, Naruto came out of the bathroom with his pants on and his body suit on up to his waist and his shirt absent. His mask was there and a towel hanging from his neck and his blade held by his left hand, which she could tell was somewhat healed. As he took a step into the room, she got a good once over his body. He had an athletic muscular build, his abs were toned and shown that he worked out daily. His hair still damp and riddled with water, had drops of water fall off and defined the masked boy. All she could do was look at a perfect-built teenage boy as he stepped into the room. Naruto just looked at Azula with tired eyes as he noticed she kept looking him over. "Give me a minute to get ready, and we can leave after," he said as he walked over to the bed and took out a scroll. He focused chakra into his palm as he laid it upon the scroll. A small poof. Later and out came another shirt. It was identical to the one he had on yesterday, but only clean. As he laid his hand on the scroll, Azula noticed a tattoo on his hand and his stomach. The one on his hand glowed while the one on his stomach appeared. As soon as the tattoo on his stomach appeared, it disappeared. The glowing tattoo stopped too. She was mesmerized at how mysterious the two tattoos reacted. However, before she could ask about the two, Naruto was dressed in his new shirt and bodysuit fully on and walking out the room with his cloak being straightened on his person and weapon at his side. She soon caught up with him. "We're leaving right away, so there'll be food on the boat," she said, getting a nod from him as he secured his blade on the back of his waist. He then threw the scroll he had into the flowing cloak. She expected it to hit the ground, but it seemed to disappear in thin air. She also noticed he looked tired. "Are you all right? If not, I don't want anything to hold back this mission. I will leave with or without you." She had crossed her arms as she spoke and strode ahead of him. He just walked aside of her and spoke. "It'll take nightmares that remind me of past to keep out of fighting condition. And I try to keep the hurtful past where it belongs in the past, and death agrees with me." He mumbled the last part, which Azula caught but barely. She just rose an eyebrow at the phase and decided to question him about it later. Now they had to get on the royal ship and get ready to depart. Naruto sat on deck observing Azula practicing her thunder bending. She went through the kata perfectly, until she noticed the hair out of place as she finished. "Almost perfect," the old lady to Naruto's left said. "One hair out of place," the twin of the old woman on Naruto's right said. Azula then narrowed her eyes at the string of hair. "Almost isn't good enough." She then pushed the hair back in place, and went through the kata again, making thunder boom as the lightning went off. Naruto then stood up, and begun to walk away. He was about to enter the ship, when he heard Azula speak to him. "Just where do you think you're going? We are about to land soon." He just turned and looked at her before turning away from her again. "I'll be in my room meditating. If you need me, I'll be there." He then opened the door and disappeared. Such a mysterious boy, that one. The old woman that was to Naruto's left said. "Yes, so mysterious. I wonder what he looks like without that mask." The old woman that was to his right said. "He must be quite handsome to hide his face." The old woman on the left said. "Yes, he must be." The old woman on the right said. Azula just glared at the door Naruto left through and spoke. "Lee, both of you stop talking about him. I'll go into the village myself and see if my brother and uncle are there and bring them here myself," she said as they docked and left the ship. Naruto walked into his room. The room was lit by 5 candles. The wax was pooling at the bottom of the candle, signaling that they were lit for some time. He walked to the middle of the room and put his right hand on the hilt of Ginryu. He unsheathed the blade and sheathed it quickly. As the click sound from the guard hit the sheath, the candles went out. He then sat in the lotus position and closed his eyes, and he held on Ginryu. He knew at would be said when he entered their domain while enshrouded in darkness. He didn't fear them. He would endure and find his new limits before he would be a mere plaything for their enjoyment. Soon as he entered the trance, he heard the taunting and luring begin. That Azula is a feisty one, isn't she? And a princess at that. Why not just leak a bit of demonic lust into her and make her yours? Then you'll be next for the throne and rule the world. He heard the temptation of Satan try and lure him as he pressed to find his limits. The best thing about that is, she's just like Makoto, but he's a bit more endowed, if you get what I'm saying. So why not just show her a little something and make her your mindless slave? The more Satan tempted, the more Naruto ignored him. Well, IED to make your life better with these ideas. Remember, you reap what you sow. Satan's voice faded, as did his appearance next to Naruto. Before he knew it, he was assaulted by images. Oh, I wonder how this ninja will die this time, Kyuubi said as the fox appeared, bringing Azula's head, held by the hair in between his teeth. Will she die by family like last time? Maybe she'll get into a fight captured. And well, you know the rest. Kyuubi let the thought wander as the images appeared, of Azula being defiled by men over and over again before killing her by crushing her skull. Maybe she'll die protecting you. Oh, I would love to see her life wither away in your arms as you can't do anything. Naruto was assaulted by images of Azula taking stabbings, arrows, and saving him from being crushed only to be crushed herself. Stop this now, Naruto yelled, as the images faded and the fox blown back as a sliver dragon coiled around him. Fine, relay on that dragon for now. When he's not around, you'll pray we'll have mercy, the Kyuubi said before it disappeared. The dragon nodded at Naruto, then uncoiled itself from and hovered beside him. Thanks, Ginryu. Never know what I'd be without you. He then reached out to the darkness and concentrated. Azula sat in a hut waiting to see if her brother and uncle would come back, like the owner said as she described the two. She looked up as the two entered the room, not taking in their surroundings, and her uncle spoke. Look at these magnificent shells. I'll enjoy these keepsakes for years to come. We don't need any more useless things. You forget we have to carry everything ourselves now. Azula heard her brother tell her uncle and decided to make herself present then and there. Hello, brother. Uncle, what are you doing here? Zuko asked firmly. In my country, we exchange a pleasant hello before asking questions. Have you become uncivilized so soon, Zuzu? She teased as she stood up and walked mere feet in front of them with a shell in her hand. Don't call me that. To what do we owe this honor? Her uncle asked, interested, with his arms crossed. Must be a family trait. Both of you so quick to get to the point. She crushed the shell in her hands as she said, point. I've come with a message from home. Father changed his mind. Family is suddenly important to him. He heard rumors of plans to overthrow him, treacherous plots. Family are the only ones you can really trust. Father regrets your banishment. He wants you home. She paused as she looked a bit touched and out the window of the hut. Then looked back at the two. Did you hear me? You should be happy, excited, grateful. I just gave you great news. She looked with a happy expression, as Zuko put both arms on the table and looked down. I'm sure your brother needs a moment. Before her uncle could speak anymore, she snapped at him. Don't interrupt, uncle. I still didn't hear my thank you. I'm not a messenger. I didn't have to come all this way. Father regrets. He wants me back. Zuko tries to even comprehend the news. I can see you need time to take this in. I'll come to call on you tomorrow. Good evening. She then exited the hut and walked back to the ship with a small smile on her face. Halfway there, Naruto opened his eyes as the door to his room was edged open enough for a single person to slip in. He couldn't tell who it was, but had a feeling as only one person would enter his room without knocking to get the confirmation from himself. He then stood up and with a flick of his wrist and some flame-atoned chakra, lit a candle. Azula was standing across from him, leaning against the wall. So, I see you're awake. Here I thought you were long asleep in the dark. she said in a sarcastic tone. I take it you went and confronted both your brother and uncle, captured them alive already? He asked, already knowing the answer. No, just twisted words to make them come without a fight. I knew I didn't need your help on this matter. But, you're still my bodyguard after all. She said the last sentence with mild distaste. Not everything goes as planned, but I will make sure things go smoothly when they get aboard and we get ready to leave port. Fine, what were you doing in the dark anyways? Finding my new limits, by centering myself. Anything else you need to know, princess? He asked a bit sarcastically. He then turned and sat on the edge of the bed with Ginryu as he held his head low with his multicolored hair draped over his eyes. Azula just glared at him and turned to leave. Don't screw up tomorrow. I want this to be over with fast. This will be our only chance to take them without a fight. She looked over her shoulder before she left the room, and saw a sight that frightened her to her core. Yet feel glad he served her as a bodyguard at that moment. The light from the candle gave off enough light to make him look like something she heard from a folklore when she was a little girl. The types of folklore to scare children into behaving. She never would have thought she would have met someone who would look like an Oni for a moment. Fire elite guards were lined up along the pier as Zuko and his uncle Iroh walked towards the ship. Azula stood on the ship with a faked welcoming smile as she looked at the two. Iroh was on edge, having a feeling things were not as it seemed in cons. Tamply looked around as they neared the ship step by step. As they stopped before the ramp leading to the deck of the ship, they bowed as Azula spoke. Brother, uncle, welcome. She too then bowed. I'm so glad you decided to come. The elite guard then fell right behind Zuko and Iroh as the ship captain turned to Azula and began to speak. Are we ready to depart, your highness? Yes, set our course for home, captain. Azula said, looking as sincere as she could. The captain then began to walk up the ramp and called out to the crew as he was halfway up. You heard the princess. Raise the anchors, we're taking the prisoners home. The captain knew he spoke a mistake as soon as he finished barking out the order. Azula gave the captain a sharp glare and silently cursed her bodyguard in being able to predict the future. Your highness, the captain stuttered as both Zuko and Iroh realized the ploy. Iroh then attacked the elite guards behind them, trying to clear an escape route, while Zuko threw the captain into the water and charged up the ramp to confront Azula. You lied to me, he yelled as he was halfway up, rage clearly expressed on his face. Like I've never done that before. Hen walked further onto the deck of the ship as she waved the two elite guards to take care of Zuko. Sadly, Zuko dispersed their firebending attacks and did a split kick with firebending, forcing the two off balance and into the water. He then got into a stance as he landed a few feet behind Azula on deck and engaged her. Iroh was almost done making an escape route as he grabbed an elite guard aft, evading his firebending attack, and shouted to Zuko. Zuko, let's go. He then tossed the guard he was holding into the water before evading and attacking more guards. On deck, Zuko was pressing on High's attacks, but none were even close to connecting as Azula dodged effortlessly. To add insult to injury, she spoke, telling him the reason why she was sent to capture him and her uncle. You know, father blames uncle for the lost at the North Pole, and he considers you a miserable failure for not finding the Avatar. Why would he want you home, other than to lock you up where you can no longer embarrass him? She could see the doubt on his face and smiled. She then seen his face morph into anger before he began to press on the attack again. She too then effortlessly dodged his attacks around the deck, even clawing at the top of his head. As he forced her near the entrance to the lower ship, she grabbed his wrist easily and smiled as confusion and a bit of fear played out on his face. She launched her own blue fire attack, forcing him backwards and falling back off the ramp leading to the lower ship door. Zuko landed on his face as he looked up at Azula, gaining his bearings fast. When he focused on her, she was charging up her lightning attack and launched it at him, only for Iroh to grab her stretched fingers and did a move to redirect the lightning through his body and out. His hand pointed at a nearby cliff. At this moment, Naruto opened the door leading from inside the ship. He then seen Iroh kick the unprepared Azula hard in the gut, making the air leave her lungs and forcing her through the air, hitting her back into the steel rail, forcing a cry of pain from her before she fell into the water unconscious. Naruto acted as soon as he heard the cry of pain from he. Arin rushed over the railing and into the water to get her before she drowned. Iroh seen the masked teenager and briefly taking in the look of worry on his face as he seen Azula fall overboard. Before he grabbed the downed Zuko and both rushed off the ship to escape. Naruto hit the water and dove deep to catch the fast-sinking Azula. As soon as he had a grip on her, he channeled Wind Elemental Akra to his feet and shot out of the water and landed on deck. He set her down and pushed slightly on her stomach before she started to cough up water. As she regained consciousness, Naruto had his CK to her wringing the water from his mask. When she was fully aware of where she was and what happened, she turned to him. "Where were you? I thought you would make sure things went smoothly." She ked as she grabbed his shoulder, turning him around. Naruto had just finished wringing out the water from his mask when he heard her start to yell at him. Then he felt her arm on his shoulder before he was forced to turn around. He didn't think she would recover so quickly, so he had a look of utter surprise when she turned him around. What Azula seen made her speechless. His face had what had to be scars to her, but she knew they were natural birthmarks. The 3 whiskers under the crimson-trimmed blue eye, and the moving flames underneath the violet with blackish-red iris eye. As she seen the surprised expression on his face, she could only think about how handsome he was. As soon as she seen his surprised expression, it turned into anger and his mask quickly covered his face again. As making sure everything ran smoothly below deck. Also, I told you I would make sure everything went smooth as we left the port, not if one of the men, or in this case the captain, couldn't keep his mouth shut. He spoke in a cold tone before standing up and walking back inside the ship as water dripped off him. Later on in the day, after Azula told the people of the town that anyone who harbored her brother or uncle after today would be severely punished and had to give any information on the whereabouts of the two, she returned to the ship to see Naruto, Lo, and Lee there. Naruto stood beside her carriage, as Lo and Lee sat on both sides a bit away from it. When tracking your brother and uncle, traveling with the royal procession may no longer be an option. Lo said, may no longer be wise. Lee continued, if you wise to keep the element of surprise. They both said, you're right. The royal procession is dead weight. If I want to catch my prey, I must be agile, nimble. I need a small elite team. It's time to visit some old friends. Azula said, only to hear Naruto speak. Shall we leave now, or does your highness need time for beauty sleep? He said with a non-caring tone. Azula just glared at him, before answering. We set out in an hour. I know you're refreshed from that dip from earlier. She finished with a sarcastic tone. Only took a dip to grab a hunk of junk when I think about it. He said with a glare to her. But nonetheless, the sooner we get this team formed, the sooner we can finish our mission. He then turned and walked down the ramp off the ship. As Azula led the way through a circus camp, they stopped in front of a girl their age on her index fingers upside down. Ty Lee, could that possibly be you? Azula asked in a friendly tone as Naruto crosses his arms with Ginryu on his waist. Azula, Ty Lee said with a happy tone, before bending forward to stand on her feet and walking to greet her longtime friend. It is so good to see you. She hugged Azula before grabbing her hands in a friendly manner. Please don't let me interrupt whatever it is you were doing. Azula said, and then Ty Lee went back to testing her flexibility. So, tell me, what is a daughter of a nobleman doing here? Certainly our parents didn't send us to the Royal Academy for Girls to end up in places like this. Azula gave a warily glance around to the animals and circus crew. Naruto looked uninterested by anything and just listened in on the conversation. I have a proposition for you. You remember my funny dunny uncle? Oh yeah, he was so funny. Ty Lee aid with her midsection in the air, leaning on her elbows with her feet resting on her head. I would be honored if you joined me on my mission. Oh, I would love to. Ty Lee then quickly got to her feet and rested her hand on her chest. But the truth is, I'm really happy here. I mean, my aura has never been pinker. Ty Lee expressed. I'll take your word for it. Well, I wouldn't want you to give up the life you love to please me. Thank you, Azula. Ty Lee bowed with her right hand cupping her left fist in front of her. Azula began to walk away and Naruto just looked between the two with suspicion on Azula's part. Of course, Before I leave I'm going to catch your show, Azula said in a friendly tone, and Naruto noticed Ty Lee staggered a bit. Yeah, sure, of course. Now Naruto knew something was up. Her tone changed from a happy-go-lucky tone to worried and a bit afraid. He then followed Azula as she left. Later on that night, Azula and Naruto watched the circus perform their acts. We're deeply honored to have the Fire Lord's daughter at our humbled circus. Tell us if there is anything we can do to make the show more enjoyable, the ring master said as people in dragon costumes danced around the circle. Azula just looked on before answering. I will. Ty Lee's act was tightrope act with a platform on the wire as she balanced in various ways to test a person's flexibility. Incredible. Do you think she'll fall? Azula asked, a bit excited. Naruto just looked on at the sheer flexibility of the girl on the tightrope. Of course not, the ring master said confidently. Wouldn't it be more interesting if you removed the net? Azula asked, as Naruto seen the frightened look on the ring master's face. The thing is the performers, he was cut off by Azula. Yeah, you're right, that's been done. I know, set the net on fire. Naruto just looked at her, knowing she was going to use fear to convince Ty Lee to join them. Of course, princess. The man then proceed, to light the net on fire with his firebending. Naruto looked up and seen the worried look on Ty Lee's face as she continued to act flawlessly. Brilliant, just brilliant. Oh, what kind of dangerous animals do you have? Well, our circus boasts the most exotic assortment. He was cut off again by Azula. Release them all. Even as all the animals were released, Ty Lee still performed flawlessly to Naruto's relief. As the show ended, Naruto grabbed Azula by the arm and turned her around. What you did could have killed a childhood friend of yours. What was going through your mind when you did that? I know you scared her by this act and now she'll join us, but to the extent to have her perform her act where one slip up and she would have died. That's wrong. He glared at her as she smiled at him. Don't patronize me. I knew full well she could perform under that kind of pressure. Now what about you, masked boy? I seen what's under that mask of yours. Why not take it off and show the world how handsome you are? She said as she reached for his mask, only for her hand to be smacked away. As his glare got colder. You may have seen my face, but you seen it under circumstances that I wouldn't allow you otherwise to see. Only 2 people seen my face, my godfather and... He didn't finish the sentence as he turned away from her. Who else? That Makoto girl you said when we first met? She asked with a bit of mirth in her voice, only to be grabbed by the front of her shirt and lifted a bit off the ground from his right hand. You may look like her, you may act a bit like her, but I will never see you as her, and I will never let you dirty her name like that even for just a second. I loved her and would have given my life to save her if I made it in time, but I will have to live with the fact that the people who killed her will get their just desserts in time. His eyes glowed as she stared into them. It was a full minute before he let her down and turned to walk away before she spoke. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to insult this Makoto girl you had such feelings about. I guess I went a little overboard on the whole circus thing, but she'll join us now and I'll introduce you to her. Naruto turned and nodded as he followed her to Ty Lee's tent. Azula dropped the bouquet of black roses on Ty Lee's nightstand. What an exquisite performance. I can't wait to see how you top yourself tomorrow. Azula said with a smile on her face. I'm sorry, Azula, but unfortunately there won't be a show tomorrow. Ty Lee said as she looked at herself in the mirror. Really, the universe has given me strong hints that it is time for a career change. I want to join you on your mission. Azula smiled and nodded before sidestepping to have Ty Lee on her right and Naruto on her left. Since we'll be traveling together, Ty Lee, I would like you to meet a person accompanying us. This is Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto bowed and waved in a friendly manner. Why do you wear a mask? Ty Lee asked curiously. To hide my face. Why else would I wear a mask? What, do you have some honorable face rash? Azula just giggled a bit as Naruto glared at her. No, in fact I hide it because I have a lot of enemies that want to kill me back where I'm from, he said in a happy tone, surprising Ty Lee. Well, shall we go? Azula said we had one more person to persuade to join our group. Naruto then politely waited for the women to leave before him, then followed. Fire Nation guards carried Azula's carriage towards the governor's mansion of Omashu as Naruto and Tai Li flanked it on both sides. They put the carriage before a girl with long black hair and an unusual hairstyle that had an octagon shape with hair in buns that stuck out like little ears near the top of the back of her head. As Azula stepped out the carriage, she walked up to the girl and put her arms on her hips, as the girl bowed, left hand being in a fist and cupped by her right hand. "Please tell me you're here to kill me," the girl said, only for her, Azula, and Tai Li to start laughing. Azula then put her hands on her shoulders before greeting her. "It's great to see you, Mai." Then stepped back to let Tai Li hug the girl. Quote, "I thought you ran off and joined the circus. You said it was your calling." "Well," Azula called a little louder. Tai Li said as she let go of Mai. "I have a mission and I need you both." Azula said as he laid her arms on both of their shoulders. "Count me in. Anything to get me out of this place." Mai immediately said. They then entered the mansion as the group held a meeting with the governor, which was Mai's father. Azula sat on a throne as everyone but Naruto were kneeling in front of her and the latter standing behind her at guard. "I apologize, you've come to Omashu at a hard time. We're making a trade with the resistance to get Taunton back." Mai's father spoke. "Yes, I'm so sorry to hear about your son, but really what did you expect by just letting all the citizens leave?" She then stood up from her seat. "My father has trusted you with this city, and you're making a mess of things. Please forgive me, princess." Mai's father bowed. Azula then walked past him while speaking. "You stay here. Mai will handle the hostage trade so you won't have a chance to mess it up. And there is no more Omashu. I am renaming it in honor of my father. The city of New Ozai." Azula then led Mai, Tai Li, and Naruto out. As the group neared the spot for the trade, they seen a group of 3 people. Then the sound of the king being lowered by crane was heard before he called out while laughing a bit. "Hi everybody." Naruto had to admit he could see that the man had experience just by the sound of his voice and how he handled himself with laughter. He then landed behind the group. Naruto stared at the man and the man looked back, then gave him a big smile as Naruto tilted his head to the side a bit. "You brought my brother," Mai called out, only to hear a young voice reply. "He's here, we're ready to trade." "Sorry, but a thought just occurred to me." "Do you mind?" Azula asked Mai. "No, of course not, Princess Azula. We're trading a 2-year-old for a king, a powerful earthbending king." At this the old man nodded and hummed an "UMMHMM. "It just doesn't seem like a fair trade, does it?" Azula said in a convincing manner, as Naruto looked at her with cold eyes. "You're right, the deal's off." Mai then signaled for the crane to lift the old man back up. "Whoa, see you all later," the king said, still in his happy tone. Boomy, the kid who spoke earlier, now rushed the group, with dust trailing him. Azula met to stop him and sent a stream of blue flames at him, only for him to jump over them. He then jumped off a ledge and flew higher with a glider somehow. The boy's turban became uncovered and shown an arrow tattoo on his head. Naruto heard Azula speak. "The avatar, my lucky day." She then rushed over to an elevator chain and grabbed one side before cutting the other with her flames. Naruto joined Mai and Tai Li on their attack of the other 2. He heard the girl yell to the boy, "We need to get the baby out of here." Naruto seen the boy blow a whistle of some sort before he yelled back at her. Already ahead of Ya, before they retreated further away in hopes to buy more time, Tai Li had gotten underneath the boy who had Mai's brother and punched him in the foot, making him trip and fall, landing before the edge. Mai threw throwing knives to the girl, who blocked them with wood that was knocked up with water she controlled from her canteen. Naruto shed past Mai and the girl who controlled water to catch up with Tai Li as they rushed the fallen boy. The girl, however, had the water grab Tai Li and tried to grab Naruto, who dodged and pulled Tai Li away. Naruto unsheathed his blade and let out a slash of wind at the water before the girl could throw Tai Li further away. "You two take care of her. Mai, I'll get your brother back." Naruto out and chased after the boy who had gotten up and slid down a ladder. Azula came up through the floor of the top floor of the construction building and sent a large stream of blue flames at the avenue. Ader, who was standing on the metal prison of the king. The avatar just cut the chains to the crane as he was freezing a part of them as he landed on the king's prison. As they were falling, the Avatar used airbending to cushion their fall and propel them down the earth slides. Azula looked on from high above on a beam crouched down with a look of displeasure. She then followed using a bin of her own to travel the slides. She soon caught up with the two and sent flames from above them. The Avatar just used airbending in conjunction with his staff to disperse the fire before it harmed anyone. EY soon broke apart if only for 30 seconds before Azula was behind him in her bin. The Avatar sent a non-violent gust of wind at her, only for her to separate it with her hands in an arrow motion. Then countering with more flames, making him use airbending to increase his and the king's speed. As the Avatar and the king passed overhead arches, he sent a gust of wind back knocking them down to KN. Azula off her bind if she were standing up. Sadly, she dove down inside the bind evading all the debris and continuing the high-speed chase. As Mai was throwing more weapons at the girl who was waterbending, they would always get blocked by wood that got knocked up to guard or water she form into ice. She then tried a surprise attack by launching arrows from a weapon on her ankle. Those were two blocked and her follow-up of arrows from the weapon on her wrist were evaded. The girl then formed ice on Mai's arm as she captured it in water. Ty Lee just recovered and crept up behind the girl and hit her with some pressure points to lock up chakra and cancel her use of waterbending. As the girl tried to waterbend, she got no results. How are you going to fight without your bending? Mai taunted as she pulled out a three-bladed throwing knife. However, they were stopped by a giant fly bison sending them away with airbending, who had two people on it fighting. Well, more like one taking carefully aimed swings that could be avoided without hitting the child. Give me the child and I won't separate your head from your shoulders, idiot. Naruto said as and swung fast and precise at the bow. Y's face leaving a small cut that wouldn't leave a scar. I only played around so far. Please, I don't want to shed needless blood, just hand over the kid. Naruto asked with his hand out. Before the boy could answer, however, the girl had already climbed on the bison and shoulder tackled Naruto off the bison. As he got up, the bison was flying away, his eyes turned cold and jumped high into the air. ND swung his blade, concentrated on unleashing a large blade of wind. When he did, it cut one of the bison's feet, making it roar out in pain. Before it disappeared from sight, as Azula was chasing the Avatar, she drove off the giant bison to help him escape. She noticed an injury on one of its legs as it flew off. As she was about to fry the Avatar with a spinning disc of blue flames, the king used earthbending to block her attack and path, making her unable to continue further. She silently cursed as she jumped to the nearest room and got down to the street below. She then made her way back to where she left the others, knowing she wouldn't be able to catch up to the Avatar in time. Naruto bowed to Mai and spoke. I'm sorry, I couldn't get hold of your brother without making him see Deet H in its cruelest form and tried a less violent way to get hold of him but was blindsided. I'm truly sorry. Mai just looked at him and spoke. It's all right, just who are you anyways? I'm sorry, we also have not been properly introduced. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I will also be accompanying you, Ty Lee, and Azula on this mission. Yeah, why did Azula bring you along? Ty Lee wondered, not being able to ask beforehand. I'm her bodyguard, he said with an eye smile. She needs a bodyguard, Mai asked. Well, it's a long story, but I bet her in a spar and the Fire Lord said I was her bodyguard. Naruto said and sheathed Ginryu. Strange blade you have there, never seen anything like it. Mai spoke out, wondering about his blade. It's from a person I see from a mother. It's called an okatana. The name of the blade though is Ginryu. Mai nodded and Ty Lee looked him over. I just noticed you have a weird hair color. Why did you dye it like that? I didn't, it's natural. There was a pregnant silence between then. That was broken by sounds of footsteps. When they turned, they saw Azula walking towards them. We leave as soon as possible, we have much work to be done. She then turned and walked to leave the city. Before she did though, she stepped into her carriage along the way and was carried the rest of the way. As they were leaving the city, Mai decided to learn more about the mission with small talk. So, we're tracking down your brother and uncle, huh? It'll be interesting to see Zuko again, won't it, Mai? Ty Lee made it clear that there was a good past between Zuko And Mai is Naruto deducted from the sound of Tai Li's voice and the brief look on Mai's face. It's not just Zuko and Iroh anymore, we have a third target now. Azula said with her face shadowed by the curtains from the carriage. The Avatar he looks awfully young to be 112 years old. No matter, he should be long gone by now. Plus living that long would be lonely, all his loved ones have been long dead. Must be tough, Naruto said as he thought back about his past. The girls noticed the deep look in his eyes, and then seen him grab a locket at the end of the handle of his blade. He was closest to Azula, being on her left as Ty Lee and Mai were on her right. Azula got a good look inside the locket when he opened it for a brief second. It looked like her when she was younger, with a picture of Naruto when he was younger too. Yet she could see the crimson eyes of the girl who looked exactly like her. She let out a small gasp, and immediately he closed the locket and glared at her before walking a bit ahead of the group. What was that about, Azula? Mai asked as she and Ty Lee looked at Naruto. Nothing, just something you need not be worried about. The more I find out about him, the more mysterious he becomes. Azula mumbled the last part to herself as they continued on. The group of 4 came to a stop outside of a large vehicle. It was dark out, but that didn't bother the group as they were prepared to head out. Naruto stared at it for what seemed like an hour, only to have Azula yelling at him, knocking from his daydreaming. Hurry up or you'll walk instead of traveling with us. Azula had a slight smirk on her face as he looked at her. What is this thing? I have never seen anything like it. Naruto looked around inside the giant-sized vehicle. It was big enough to house about 15 people, and the animals inside the last compartment interested him. He had heard Ty Lee say they were mongoose dragons. They loaded 3 of them, since he heard that the army couldn't spare any more. It's a Fire Nation army tank. It's used in sieges and to crush ground troops. They mostly use it to go over obstacles and go through them as well. We'll be using it to track the Avatar and his group, as you have found the lead that they were near that village that celebrated Avatar Day. Then there's a trail we picked up of what seems to be the flying bison's fur. It's shedding now, so it's spring already. Naruto had a far-off look in his eyes and walked inside the tank, passing Azula as Mai and Ty Lee were inside already. Azula just looked at his retreating figure before heading inside also. As she passed Mai and Ty Lee spoke. What's up with Naruto? He seemed a bit like Mai when he came in. Has something to do with spring? Something obviously happened then. Azula sat down as they went into a lounge room inside the tank. Maybe it's his birthday, Ty Lee said with a bit of excitement. No, he doesn't seem to be someone who cares about things like that, Mai said as she put her hand under her chin in thought. It probably has to do with where he came from. You did say he has his birthplace after him, right, Azula? Ty Lee asked. No, he could care less about being hunted down, since the people from there run from him due to him being strong and the best they have, Azula said, only to have the person of the discussion enter the room. How right you are. I was trained to be so. So, why talking about me, ladies? He sat down next to Azula and leaned Ginryu against him. Oh well, Mai and I were wondering what's got you so down, Ty Lee asked with her usual perk, only to have Mai look at her. Don't you mean you were wondering, Ty Lee? It's nothing, just this season brings both good and bad memories. Either way, we've just started moving and the crew says they had seen the group. Also, it seems someone is following our trail. Zoo. Exactly. He's still a ways away but should catch up to us if we stop for rest and engaging the enemy multiple times. Also, I don't think they know how we're tracking them since it's late at night and I don't think they've had time to rest. So, we'll chase them until they collapse and capture them easily. How boring. Mai, I don't think they'll be that stupid and unobservant. They have yet to land yet, and will continue to fly until they think they lost us. So ladies, get some rest because I don't think they'll stop anytime soon. With that, he left the room planning on getting some rest before engaging the Avatar's group. As the group watched him leave, Mai and Ty Lee looked back at Azula with slight confusion. Did your bodyguard just give us orders? Mai asked with her usual tone. I believe he did, Mai, Ty Lee said, still confused. Azula looked surprised for a moment before she narrowed her eyes and left the room. As she caught sight of Naruto, He was entering his room. She walked up to the door with her hand about to open the door, when the door was opened from the inside and Naruto stood there looking her in the eyes. "Yes, Azula, what do you need?" he asked calmly as he opened the door a bit wider to let her in if need be. "We need to talk now," she said in a stern voice that had the tone that she was not backing down or be fazed by anything he was going to say in that next moment. "Fine, come in and we can discuss what is on your mind." And he walked into the room after letting her in and closing the door. His room was simple. It had a bed, a bathroom, and a chair and desk, not that much different from a soldier's room. Since there was only the crew of 4 to man it, there were plenty of rooms bigger than what Naruto had. He simply picked that room, since it was the room in the only hallway leading to the emergency exit. He figured if there was an attack on them he would hold the enemy in that hallway while everyone else got away. As Naruto saw Azula sit on the bed, he took the chair by the desk not 5 feet away. He set Ginryu on the desk behind him and stared at her. So, she just glared at him for a moment longer before answering him. "You do know you serve me, so you obey my orders and have no right to order me around." Her tone clearly showed she was not pleased, which he picked up on inside. "You don't get it, do you? I said what I said, not as an order, but it is my job to make sure you're safe. So, go get some sleep in." He wasn't able to finish as she lashed with her blue fire, forcing him to roll away from the attack and got a sharp kick inside, knocking him into the wall of the small room. She was BEF. Or him as he regained his senses, her face half a foot away as she glared at him. "You don't order me around, you answer to me and my father. I do not answer to you. Do you understand?" She made it clear that she wanted what she said to make it through to him by having blue flame linger around her right hand as she placed it by his left arm. Naruto looked at her, then at his left side, feeling the heat from the flame. He then grabbed her wrist and brought it up to his face as the blue flame burned his hand. He looked her in the eyes and spoke without fear. "Burn me, if you want to wound someone who'd give their life for you, then burn me and show me how much you detest me." Azula just stared at his eyes and how serious he was. She was surprised that he grabbed her hand while the fire was still encircled around it. But more so surprised that he thought she hated him enough to scar him or kill him. The fire just needed more strength to maim and leave permanent damage if her were a normal human being. Having 2 power demon spirits makes things like that seem unimportant as they heal any damage done. But he still held her wrist close to his face in a hold that would make her struggle to get out of. After staring at him for about a few minutes, she looked away as the fire encircling her hand extinguished and went limp in his hold. He let her go and walked over to his bed and sat down on it. "You get it now. I'm here because I care for you enough with my life." He then saw that Ginryu had been blown off the desk and landed on the floor near his bed. He then leaned over to grab it, only to see her feet appear by his desk. Why do you care for me when we never met before the meeting with my father?" She had leaned up against the desk and looked at his prone form when she spoke. He just retrieved Ginryu and laid back on the bed as the blade lay across his body. "I don't know, I just felt I'd have someone who'd need me when the time comes. I did, and now she's gone. Then it felt like I let her down. Then I had that same feeling about a year ago after finding myself. Now, I do not know about you, but I'm going to sleep before we encounter the Avatar and his group." That he turned to the side away from her as Ginryu fell and hit against the wall and lay in a slanted angle against his body and the wall. Azula then left the room, not looking back until the door was closed behind her. She then entered her own room and fell asleep herself, trying to get her mind off her bodyguard. Little did she know, she didn't lock her door. Naruto stepped onto the bridge of the vehicle the group was riding in and turned to the 3 people driving the thing. Report, his eyes showing order from that of a commander would have. "Sir, we have spotted the bison. Seems they know we are close by somehow. Either way, with the rotation we have, it should be a matter of time before they either fall out of the sky due to lack of sleep or let their guard down." The main driver ate as he stopped working for a moment and saluted Naruto as he gave the report. "Understood. Don't overwork yourselves and make sure the other group doesn't either. After we leave on the Mongoose Dragons, head to the nearest Fire Nation base, restock and get new orders there. Also watch out for Earth Kingdom troops and ambushes when we leave. If you have no choice, destroy the controls and abandon this and flee. Better to be alive to fight another day with even numbers than dead from being overwhelmed. Also give us notice when they stop for a decent amount of time. Naruto turned and left the bridge after he gave a slight nod. He then walked around for a bit, getting a feel for the short but roomy area they were given. After about an hour from leaving the bridge, a driver come up to him in a rush. "Sir, we have obtained sight of the targets and confirmed that they haven't taken off yet," the soldier said in a bow. Naruto nodded and turned. "Prepare for our leave. I'll let the women know and have a safe trip to a base solider." His form disappeared around Tay corner as the soldier turned and went to inform the others. Naruto came to Mai's door first and knocked quickly. A moment later, she opened the door with a dreadful look and a knife in hand. "What do you want, Naruto? Time to go, so get ready and go wake up Ty Lee as I wake Azula. The soldiers are preparing the mongoose dragons." She gave him a quick nod before closing the door to get ready. Naruto rushed down to hall opposite to where Ty Lee's room was and stood at Azula's room. He knocked the door quickly as he did to wake up Mai. He waited a moment, before knocking again, and this time it opened the door. He opened it a bit more and stepped inside the room. He lit a candle before spotting her figure on the bed and walked over silently and slowly shook her. As he did, he couldn't help but remember Makoto when she slept next to him when they watched the clouds when he was inside the village. He was quickly shaken from his memories when he heard her start to wake. As Azula started to open her eyes, she was met with the sight of Naruto shaking her gently. She sat up and looked at him. "Why are you here?" He got up and turned to the door. "The Avatar and his gang has stopped long enough for us to launch an attack. The mongoose dragons should be ready to go with supplies as Mai went to wake Ty Lee and get ready herself. I'll meet you three in the hangar with my weapons." The door closed behind him as he left. Azula just watched him leave, before getting ready herself. Her mind was still on the confrontation from earlier. The vehicle came to the stop as Ty Lee and Mai each mounted a mongoose dragon. As Azula mounted her own mongoose dragon, Naruto jumped and landed behind her on the dragon she was riding. The beast was a bit startled, but quickly settled down as it became accustomed to the weight and the feel from the new passenger. She looked over her shoulders at him with a curious eye. "All right, WITHU, since I can support with my abilities. I'm a balance of everyone here. Decent hand-to-hand combat, great use of weapons, and I can bend both fire and wind. Also, since I'm your bodyguard, riding with you will make my job easier." She turned and watched as the hangar door opened and commanded the beast they rode on to go forward, followed by Ty Lee and Mai on their own steeds. As Naruto looked around, he noticed they were on a mountain. They rode up a narrow path leading to the plateau. As they rushed up the path on their steeds, Naruto noticed that Doden techniques were being used by the small girl as multiple rocks tried to block their advancement. They did not help as their steeds just climbed over them. Just as they were 3/4 of the way there, the girl raised a wall of rock. Azula charged up her lightning. As Naruto did the same, they both blew a hole large enough for the group to climb through all at once. As the group was just about there, Naruto noticed the girl was the only one that hadn't been on the bison. Mai threw some knives, only for the girl to use her Doden techniques to catapult her onto the bison and evading the knives as they hit the rock that flung her. Azula just stared out as their target flew away. "We'll need the tank one last time to get us out of this area." She turned the mongoose dragon around and headed back toward the tank. "They'll be tired as the sun will raise within the hour. They probably haven't been up days at a time, meaning they will land soon due to either falling out of the sky or taking a break to resupply." Azula nodded at the words from Naruto as they went back to the tank. As the group stopped at a river, they saw fur in the river going downstream. Naruto continued to look around. He crouched down near the trail of fur. "Wads of wet fur, how delightful," Mai commented with her usual tone. They're not wads, they're more like bundles or bunches. It's got an sound to it." Ty Lee pondered as she put her hand under her chin. Clumps, they're clumps." Ty Lee hugged Mai as she found the word. Naruto shook his head as he examined near the trail of fur. "The trail leads this way," Mai told Azula as she let Ty Lee go. Azula looked around near the trees and noticed a couple treetops had been ripped away. The Avatar is trying to give us the slip. You three head in that direction and keep a lookout for the bison. I'll follow this trail. Naruto stood up and turned to the three girls. There's two people in this direction the trail takes. Footprints, barefoot ones probably by the girl that uses earth since the waterbender, and the others all had footwear. It's an ambush, a clever one at that. Using the fur to hide the footprints was clever. So, I'll come with you, Azula, and since we still know Zuko is following us, we can easily take account for the unknowns. Naruto brushed aside some of the trail to show the small footprints left behind. The girls nodded and began to group up. Before they left, Naruto took out a map of the area and marked a couple spots where he and Azula would be heading in. So, those are possible ambush spots? Ty Lee asked as she looked on, only to get a nod from Naruto. This is the possible destination the Avatar and the Earthbender would be in, have a perfect chance to ambush. Since there's two routes, we can take the shortcut and meet up later. Naruto said as put his hand under his chin. There, we can regroup there and set up camp if it is too late. Ty Lee and Mai, you two take the equipment with you, since you two will probably be at the Rendezvous point first if you take the bison group first. Azula marked a point a few miles downstream from their position. Zuko probably has a map, so I can ambush him on the shortcut about 3/4 of the way there. Then regroup with you soon after. Naruto pointed out a small spot with mostly trees on the path he and Azula were going to take. Good, then we know the plan. Let's go, Ty Lee, before they get further away. Mai said as she got on her mongoose dragon, followed by Ty Lee, and soon left. Shall we? Naruto said with a mock bow as he led Azula on the mongoose dragon first. Let's go. Azula made the steed run off in the direction of the fake trail. Ty Lee and Mai soon found the bison and saw that the waterbender and the other water tribe boy was with her. As they neared the river, Mai shot some arrows up towards the boy on the bison and missed as he threw himself backwards. The bison crash landed across the river, giving them false hope, only to be crushed as Mai and Ty Lee crossed the river with their mongoose dragons. The waterbending girls sent a giant wave at them, only for Mai to evade to the right while Ty Lee jumped on top of the wave as a stepping stone before leaping to a tree on the river bank. As her mongoose dragon was hit by the wave, some of the camping equipment got washed as the animals swam back to the other side of the river. As Ty Lee reached the tree, she used it as a springboard to jump to other trees like an acrobat before charging at the waterbender and attacking. Her attacks, however, were evaded barely as the waterbender tried to strike her with discs of water. After she evaded, Ty Lee just somersaulted away to avoid from being injured. Mai, still riding on her mongoose dragon, came and shot 3 arrows from her wrist at the girl. Why for them to be knocked away by the boy with a club and boomerang. He then threw the boomerang at her, thus causing her to dismount and shoot 3 more arrows at him from the hidden arrow shooter on her ankles. Only for them to be knocked away with his club. Mai then rushed the girl and passed the boy. Ty Lee then landed behind the boy and striking his arm, making it useless. He tried to counter with a roundhouse from his other arm, only for her to strike it and making it also useless. He tried to counter again with a kick this time, only to get the same result. He then lost balance and fell forward into her fist. Ty Lee got a bit frustrated as she cupped her fist. The boy then spoke as he got a cocky look on his face. Good try, but no. Mai followed the waterbending girl to a tree by the river. As the girl tried to bend, Mai pinned her arms to the tree by her wrist warmers. The boy then hopped by Mai and landed in front of the girl, who then spoke. How ya doing? Well, you know, she said in a worried tone. As Ty Lee walked up beside Mai, she spoke. I thought when Ty Lee and I finally caught up to you guys, it would be more exciting. Oh well, victory is boring. As soon as she finished, the bison sent a wind gust behind the two, sending them downriver and into the water. About 5 minutes later they get out of the river by their mongoose dragons. As they wring out the water from their person, Ty Lee spoke. Was it just me, or was that guy kind of cute? Mai just looked at her as if she was crazy. Naruto was crouched down in a tree waiting for Zuko if he came the path he thought he would. Sadly, Zuko followed the fake trail left by the Avatar to where Azula was now. Naruto, however, wouldn't figure this out for another 5 minutes. As Azula got off her steed, the Avatar spoke. All right, you caught up with me, now who are you and what do you want? She just put her hand on her hip and had a small smile as she spoke. You mean you haven't guessed? You don't see the family resemblance. Here's a hint. Her face turned serious and she put her hand over her left eye. I must find the Avatar to restore my honor. Her voice mocked her brother and got a look of indifference from the Avatar. It's okay. You can laugh, it's funny. A small smirk found its way to her lips. So what now? Now, it's over. You're tired and you have no place to go. You can run, but I'll catch you. I'm not running. He stood up and got into a combat stance. Do you really want to fight me? Yes. Zuko came riding in and dismounted in a combat position. I really do. Zuko, I was wondering when you'd show up, Zuzu. Azula folded her arms, not worried about the newcomer. The Avatar giggled with his hand over his mouth. Zuzu, back off, Azula, he's mine. I'm not going anywhere. She got into her combat stance. Naruto cursed as he knew his target should have been there by now. He then turned to where Azula went and sped off in that direction on the trees. Should have talk, and in account that her brother would be foolhardy. I'm coming, Azula, your backup is on the way. Azula attacked first with a strong blast of fire at Zuko, who couldn't evade and guarded the blow some. What with his own flame before being sent into a pillar of a wall hard. The Avatar tried to fly away on his glider, but Azula sent a long wave of fire down on his, causing him to protect himself with his staff as he landed on his back. Azula on a nearby building now jumped into the air and tried to stomp on him, only for him to evade and then evade her fire leg sweep. The Avatar kept dodging attacks from both Azula and Zuko. Then Zuko tried to burn Azula with a fire stomp, only to dispelled by her own flame defense. Then forced Zuko to backflip away as she aimed a stream of fire towards the ground. Then forced the Avatar to jump back from his would-be attack at her rear. He then lured both Azula and Zuko into a building while floating in the air over the destroyed floor. Azula catch herself before she fell into the building and used the small footing by the door to stay up, while Zuko rushed in and fell down to the bottom floor. Azula then shot more fire at him, only for him to evade and shove her down to the floor below. She landed on her feet and evaded a blast from Zuko, only to him into a wall and back outside with her own blast, thus temporarily knocking him out of the fight. The Avatar then tried to evade her blasts by sticking to two close buildings like a spider, but was knocked down under some rubble as she cut the roof he landed on. As she walked into the building, she set the borders of the room on fire and slowly progressed inside the room. When she was about to deal a killing blow, her arm was swallowed by water and she was thrown down for a brief moment. As the girl cut some of the rubble with her waterbending, Azula sent a blast of her fire out the door at the girl as she ran away. Azula then gave chase around the corner, only to dodge a boomerang arm to take off her head. She then backed away seeing that she is outnumbered. She then countered any attacks at her, only to be knocked down by the earth under her moving. She then shot some blasts at her enemies, seeing an alley to escape through only to run into Iroh and Zuko. As she backed away into the corner of a ruined building surrounded, she looked at the six before her. Well, look at this, enemies and traitors working together. I'm done. She then raised her hands, only to jump back as four kunai landed in front of her enemies and then explode in four small blasts. She looked up and saw Naruto before her with his back to her. Where were you and what about ambushing Zuko? Naruto just stared ahead at their enemies. Go and take this chance to escape. I'll hold them off then meet with you at the agreed place. He got into a battle stance with his arms close to his body. She was about to speak against him, only to get a glance from him out of the corner of his eye. Go now. They're getting their senses back. She nodded and turned and soon disappeared from the scene of battle. As the smoke cleared, the six people caught sight of not Azula, but Naruto as his cloak fluttered in the breeze and his eyes as cold as ice. Now your battle is with me. Zuko was the first one to notice him and spoke. You were with my sister on the boat. Why are you here? Well, it's quite simple. I'm here to help Azula. Now, let's see how you fare against someone prepared. He trailed off, before sending a low blade of wind with a sweep and propelling himself off the ground and on to a building with a wind blast from his hands. Everyone evaded the blade of wind, though they were surprised that he could use wind. He's an airbender. How? Aang, I thought you were the last airbender. The boy with the boomerang yelled as he pointed at Naruto. I thought so too, but he doesn't look like an air nomad. Aang said and got back into a battle stance. Whoever he is, he let that girl get away. Maybe we can get some answers out of him. The earthbending girl said. Naruto then noticed she was blind at the way her eyes had no pupils. He then sent a stream of fire to his left and roll D to the right to avoid and block an attack from Zuko and Iroh. He then ducked under a blast at his upper chest and somersaulted backwards with fire to send Zuko off the building they were on. He and Iroh then deflected each blast from one another by slapping each other's hands to the side. He then ducked and pushed off with his hands to spin away from a rock directed at him and away from Iroh. He landed on all fours, to be blasted away by a gust of wind through a building. He hit back first into a wall where a rock was sticking out and broke a rib. He then jumped up, put his feet to the wall, and pushed off and over a boulder heading where he was. He twisted in the air and sent a stream of fire to knock a whip of water heading at him away, only to be hit dead on with a gust of wind, sending him skidding on his left arm and dislocating it. Everyone heard the sickening snap of the limb as he rolled along the ground. He slowly got to his feet as they progressed on his position. Little did he know he grabbed a few smoke bombs out of his pocket as he stood up. Give up, your life is not worth throwing away, Iroh said in a wise voice, only to be drowned out by laughter. So you were the only to notice, Iroh. No wonder they call you Dragon. Naruto's laughter still hung in the air even as he spoke. He even spit up a bit of blood into his mask. Wise and powerful, I knew I had no chance with you and that earthbender here. She can see everything yet nothing at all, but it's about time for me to make my leave. He then let the smoke bombs in his hands hit the ground and explode. He even left a small gift, in case one of them were foolish enough to run into the smoke, as he used a quick teleport jutsu to appear on a building just out of view. He stood up just as the explosion tag he placed on the ground exploded. He looked back and seen that only Iroh was caught in the blast as he pushed Zuko away. It wouldn't kill the man, but it would leave him injured for at least a week. He then jumped away before they started to look around for him. As Naruto was just 10 feet away from the rendezvous point, he collapsed. The broken rib had an open wound on it by the rock and he didn't notice until a few minutes after he escaped. He didn't lose consciousness, but he couldn't move that well. He still strained to get up and finally got through a bush and into view of the camp they set up. The three girls had turned at the sound a moment earlier and were prepared for a fight, only to see him limp through the bush with his left arm hanging limply at his side. Hey, he said weakly and fell face forward, only to be caught by Azula. Naruto, what happened? Azula said as she helped him stand up, only to feel the blood leak through his shirt. Gave you enough time to make an escape and not be tracked. Make sure I wasn't followed also, but was hard since I couldn't move all that well to this broken rib. He laughed a bit before trying to walk a bit, only to fall and be caught again. He's pretty banged up, Azula, Mai said as she looked at the small pool of blood at his feet and the blood stain on his mask. I just need rest, just need a place to lay down, he said as she started to walk again, only for Azula to stop him. Ty Lee, go get some water and bandages. Mai, you get something prepared for him to eat, Azula ordered as she helped him in one of the two tents. As she lay him down in a tent, she went to take off his cloak near his face, only for him to grab her hand with his right hand. Don't take off my mask. You'll get a nasty surprise if you do. Before could finish, he lost consciousness. She then hooked his cloak and reached up towards his mask, only to get shocked and pulled her hand back. Just then Ty Lee entered the tent with some water and bandages. Naruto came to some time later, and heard the girls outside as he remembered that the blood-activated seal on his mask was active. Azula, you think he's going to be all right? He heard Ty Lee ask. Yeah, you said he had some internal bleeding. Shouldn't we get him more help? That was Mai as she had the monotone and logical statement. That's the thing, he did have internal bleeding when I set the first bandages on him. Then when I changed them later, the bleeding stopped. He wasn't kidding when he said he was an abnormally fast healer. He heard Azula say, when do you think he'll wake up? Ty Lee was heard. How about now? he said loud enough for them to turn and look inside the tent. He just noticed that the sun was long set and they had a fire going. Good you're awake, Ty Lee said with spunk. A bit too much as Naruto cringed at the loud noise. Quiet Ty Lee, he just woke up and still sore. He could also have a headache from the blood lost. Mai said as she shushed her friend. That was stupid what you did. Azula said as she looked at him. He just looked at her and then looked away. Ty Lee and Mai looked at the two and slowly backed out the tent. What would you have done? He asked as he continued to look away. He waited and she said nothing. I made a promise to you and I won't let it down or abandon it. He paused and looked at her and noticed she looked away at him when he asked her his question. So, I'll tell you this right now. I'll always keep my promise, Azula. She looked at him and her golden eyes met his multicolored eyes before turning and leaving as she felt something she hadn't felt before. He just looked as she left the tent, then turned his head and closed his eyes again. Omake the Christmas special. Naruto was not comfortable as the room was filled with people. He saw Aang, Katara, her brother Sokka, Toph, Zuko, Mai, Ty Lee, and the one who dragged him to this party, Azula. He just leaned against the wall with his arms folded as he listened to the music and people chat. There had to be over 50 people here. He never felt comfortable in groups this large or groups with more than 4 or 5 people. He was too busy looking around when Azula grabbed his hand and dragged him out to the dance floor and wrapped her arms around his neck. She then whispered in his ear, "Come on, dance with me, Naruto." By the way she slurred her words she was a bit tipsy as he seen her drink offset and knew even though she was underage, she could hold her liquor as well as he did. I don't think your brother is liking me much. He noticed the look from Zuko. He's just mad cause you kicked his ass on and off film. She then reached down and pinched his ass as they continued to dance to the slow song playing. Hey, watch the hands, what would your father think? That didn't help as she pointed towards a corner and noticed that Ozai and her mother Ursa were attacking each other at the mouth. I don't think he'd mind much. She then reached up for his mask, only for him to stop it. Come on, stop that and you need to sober up if we're going to help set up the Christmas tree. That's after the party though, and mostly everyone will be smashed. Look at Sokka and Toph. The two were sitting down leaning against a wall, while downing shots of vodka. How did we get all these drinks? Doesn't Nickelodeon frown upon underage drinking? He then looked over by the punch bowl to see the child who played him as a young boy and the young girl who played young Azula and Makoto both smoking and drinking. Yeah, we're so going to get cancelled if they find out. His sweat dropped as Ty Lee got a table and started dancing. Relax, it's Christmas and a time to sit back and unwind. Aang said as he and Katara danced past the two. Come on everyone, it is time to set up the tree. Iroh yelled as he came through the door. As everyone that was sober and heavily drunk walked outside to the giant Christmas tree. The 4 that were supposed to decorate the top half of the tree stood in front of it. Aang stood sober and ready. Toph was swaying left and right trying to keep her balance with an occasional hiccup. Ozai was straightening his clothing. And last but not least Naruto palmed his face and shook his head. Next was the 4 who were supposed to decorate the rest of the tree. Ty Lee had her shirt off with and was just in a bra with her eyes halfway open. Mai had a blush as the person next to her kept grabbing her ass. Zuko standing next to Mai kept grabbing said girl's ass. And Sokka was face first in the snow with his ass up in the air, dead to the world. Iroh then stepped forward and turned to the crowd of partygoers and everyone who came to watch. As part of the cast from the show Balance of Worlds, we will now decorate the Christmas tree in the town square. Iroh said into a microphone. Naruto then kicked Sokka, only to get no response and have the boy's ass wiggle in the air. Azula and Katara then walked up. I'll talk, my brother and put him in his hotel room. And I'll take his spot in setting up the Christmas tree. Hey everyone, I'll get all the decorations up with one try. Toph said with a hiccup at the end. As she stomped on the ground and all the decorations went flying into the air, most not even near the tree. Save the decorations, someone yelled out. Eric Bar Ra, some random drunk yelled out. Holy crap, it's an alien invasion. Another random drunk yelled. I see dead people. Toph yelled out for no apparent reason. So, it was up to Aang, Naruto, Zuko, Ty Lee, Azula, Mai, and Ozai with help from Momo and Appa to catch the falling decorations. Luckily for them, in the budget they caught or helped them safely land the decorations so they wouldn't break. And after about a half an hour and 3 more shenanigans from drunkards, they finally set up the tree. Naruto looked up at the tree and shook his head. It may have been troublesome with certain people, but the tree looked really good. He looked on as Aang set the star on the top of the tree and flipped off and landed on Appa. The two then flew down and everyone clapped. Naruto turned and walked to the closest door, only to stop and turn to see Azula, Ty Lee, and the drunk top there. Hey, aren't you going to stay for the rest of the party with Christmas songs and stuff? Ty Lee asked. Yeah, stay for the show hot stuff, Toph said, with hiccups and slurring of most words. Naruto just shook his head at her, since no one seen him under his mask and she couldn't see in the first place. No thanks, I'm going back to my room and going to sleep. I was one of the people who had to film today and I'm a bit sore after those action scenes. At this Azula smirked. Well then, I'll make sure you get to your room, and also I want to give you my present. At this Azula grabbed his hand, and for the rest of the night and next day no one seen those two. Omake to the New Year's bash. You do know how much I hate you now, right, Sokka? Nar, Yuto said as he was dressed in just a pair of boxers with his mask on. Yeah. Why do we have to do this? It's not like the ladies are doing something like this, Zuko said as he folded his arms wearing a pair of boxer shorts. You guys don't know. The girls are coming out in bathing suits or lingerie, Sokka said with excitement and flexed as he was in a tight pair of black underwear. Every man Zhu, Chi looked away as he seemed to make the tight small pair of underwear get smaller. Will you stop flexing, God? You're making me want to be Toph right now. This is just torture, Aang said as he covered his eyes. Dude, ever heard of a razor at the South Pole, God? A kid named Jet said. As the men left the changing room for the show they were in to let in the new year, they waited in line to be called out on stage. Remind me again, why do you get to wear a mask? Zuko asked. Because I was voted most sexy person on the cast for the past 2 months and people want to know what's under the mask. But the writers won't let them, and thus adds to my overall sexiness, and it is a bit of a spoiler as when a certain person sees my face, you know. If you mean Azula, she already seen your face, right? Aang asked. Yeah, but that's only one half of it. Towards the end of the story, when a certain other person sees my face, it turns all OMGBBQSAUCE. Zuko and Aang just looked at Naruto as if he grown another head. Don't blame me. That's what the main writer told me. His name is Lilchao's 420 or something. Looks like we're being called out now. And so all the guys were called out on stage. And we're shocked to see all the women in tasteful dresses from all around the world as they were in nothing but underwear. They all turned to Sokka and glared evilly, as all the women, people at the dinner, and people at home who watched the televised event laughed. It seems someone got the wrong notice, Zuko said with rage present in his voice, and every man started to beat the crap out of Sokka. I swear that's what the note said. I even got it from Toph. Sokka cried out as he was getting beat. Azula, Katara, Mai, Ty Lee, Toph, and 2 other girls by the name of Yu and Suki giggled and high-five each other as they watched the men come out, get embarrassed, and beat up Sokka. Then everyone but Toph and Azula reached into their cleavage or wherever they stored their money and slipped Azula $100 each. Then slipped Toph $50 each. Told you Naruto was ripped and had to wear extra large boxers, Azula said as she slipped the money into her cleavage. And told you I could make them all come out in their underwear, Toph said as she slipped her money into a little purse that came with her dress. This was a good way to see in the new year, huh, girls? Azula asked with a smirk. The end. Now we will see you in the next video.